It's like starting all over again for Wisconsin football. The Badgers back on the field against Michigan in game 2 for them, game 4 for anybody else who's able to get on the field in the Big Ten this week. We got Tyler Hunt on the line from SB Nation's Bucky's Fifth Quarter. Tyler, how you doing today?
I'm great. I'm happy to be back on. I know it's been a couple weeks since we've had Badger football, so just excited. I know it's a huge game for Wisconsin, but I think Badger fans, win or lose, are going to be happy to have them back because it was a tough little tease that first week to get them back and play so well, and then be kind of on hiatus for 2 more weeks. It feels like the season's kind of starting back over, but it should be exciting and a good contest Saturday night.
Wisconsin got out there as the first team in the Big Ten on a Friday night against Illinois, of course, and cleaned up rather well, 45-7 in that one. And everybody else has played multiple games since, finally getting Wisconsin back out there. So great to have the Badgers back. The quarterback situation is the one in question, of course, because it was Graham Mertz who had been replacing Jack Cohn out with a leg injury for the conclusion of 2020. So it's Graham Mertz. Of course, he threw 5 touchdowns in 20 of 21 in game 1 and fulfilled much of the potential that we had anticipated as an Elite 11 guy. And then unfortunately, he tested positive. His backup did as well, Chase Wolf. And how committed is Paul Chryst to an answer of who's going to start, and what are your thoughts?
He's not very committed on giving any sort of clear answer. And in his Monday presser, he said it was he'd see how Graham Mertz was progressing, but he really didn't have much of an answer that way. And with the rules of college football, this right now, you don't really have to give an answer. So I doubt he's gonna give an edge that way. I think if you look at it, Graham Mertz is, as long as he progressed throughout the week and then everything was clear, I think he'll be cleared. Medically to play that way. It's just a matter of the practice. I believe he can return to practice tomorrow. So he'd get a day's practice before the contest and then, whatever they did virtually. I still think if he's been your guy and was your starter come into week 1, I think even with only a day's practice, I know that's a lot to ask, but it's also a lot to ask to maybe, lean on what looked like was going to be your 4th string kid possibly, because the status of Chase Wolf is kind of up in the air too. So I think a day's practice, Graham Mertz is probably just as good. So you might as well throw him out there and see what happens.
So, Tyler, as I understand it, based on CDC guidelines and even Big Ten rules, Wisconsin could have played the game against Nebraska. The Badgers opted not to play.
Yes, I believe that is the case. They were. I think the Big Ten has the color-coded protocols. Wisconsin wasn't at that red threshold yet. But they continue to have, rising positive cases where they would have been maybe creeping towards it. I think the Purdue game, they may have been in that red threshold with the 27 cases confirmed. But thankfully, after that, it has not been not any rises in cases or no additional ones. It's been declining every day. I think the last we had was 5 active cases at one point. So that seems to be dwindling down, and it's kind of hopefully gotten out of the program completely, because of course they can't afford to lose any more games, whether it be from them having COVID or an opponent. I know Big Ten has now lost another game and team with Maryland and Ohio State, but it's an interesting situation, and unfortunately for the Badgers, it hit them. But in this COVID season, they got it out of the way early, and maybe they can still salvage something and get the rest of their games in.
MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. We break down the game we all love each and every day with the best bloggers, broadcasters, and writers in the nation. Hit that subscribe button, turn on the bell for the notifications. That way you know when we're going live, which is just about every day, with call-in shows and team-specific live streams. Tyler Hunt's on the line from Bucky's Fifth Quarter on SB Nation to talk up Wisconsin football. Big matchup with Michigan. This is 2 of the fine top-level programs in the Big Ten, but Michigan certainly not playing as such. What have you seen out of the Wolverines? They come out in week 1, and they light it up against a Minnesota team that finished in the top 10 last year that has shown not to be the same team. And the last 2 weeks, a disappointing efforts against Michigan State and Indiana, losing to the Hoosiers for the first time in forever, 1987.
Yeah, that was a crazy 2 weeks for them. The really what I think I noticed when I watched some of that game, or looked at a little bit of it back and the stats, is that the run game for them is really non-existent at this point in time. At least seems like they've been kind of struggling with their offensive identity a little bit. What do they want to do? It looked like last week I think they only ran for 13 some yards on the ground against Indiana. The run game was non-existent, and I don't think as a Michigan team, that they can't run the football. I don't think they want to be throwing it 51 times like they did with Joe Milton. He's a good quarterback, I think, big arm, and a mobile kid, but I don't think Michigan is looking to rely on the pass that heavily. It'd be like there's a similar program to Wisconsin where they like to use their guys up front and run the football. So on that aspect, I think it bodes well for the Badgers. The defensive line for Wisconsin is probably one of the strengths of their defense. So hopefully they can shut that run game right back down and allow their secondary to make some plays, up front and in the secondary is where Wisconsin's strongest on defense. So I think they match up really well with the Wolverines at this point. The linebacker core is the kind of the younger and inexperienced part of the defense. So if you can rely on a push from your defensive line and allow your secondary to make plays, I think it bodes well for the Wisconsin defense to hopefully, get to Michigan and force some turnovers.
Yeah, that's a matchup I'm looking at as being a huge advantage for Wisconsin on paper for two teams that, from a talent perspective, seem to be obviously in the same ballpark. And if anything, Michigan would rank from a recruiting standpoint as a superior team, but just cannot run the football. They have four capable running backs. Two of them had big seasons last year in Hassan Haskins and Zach Charbonnet, but the offensive line is riddled. They've got two more injuries up front coming into this game. They've been able to throw and catch a little bit, but against a defense that's always fundamentally sound and brings back most of its productivity, it doesn't look good for the Maize and Blue on that side of the ball. Flipping sides, to lose your starting quarterback is obviously huge, but when you've got an Elite 11 as the backup and then he shows us what he can do and did, but the possibilities of then losing him would be nearly devastating to any team. But in particular, this Wisconsin version, Tyler, I'm going to summarize this way. It may not have hurt previous Wisconsin editions as much with the star running back and the huge reliance on the running game, but I would think a little bit more, or maybe significantly more, with this running back by committee approach and not having the one star back there. This was going to be a more pass reliant team.
Yeah, coming into the season, it looked like a team that might throw the ball a little bit more in general. You've got Graham Mertz, who, if he answered the questions, which I think he kind of did in that opener, you saw the talent that he's got. And then you had experienced receivers, four seniors in that receiving core. Danny Davis and Kendrick Pryor, guys that have played a lot. You've got Jake Ferguson, who had a huge game that week one. So you looked at it and you saw the weapons were kind of at the quarterback position and, tight end receiver, so you could throw it more. But I think this week in particular, if Graham Mertz is the guy that is good to go, that they might look to throw it even more, because that Michigan secondary has been really picked apart the last couple weeks by Rocky Lombardi from Michigan State and Michael Penix a week ago for Indiana. That secondary is struggling, and if Graham Mertz can come out and be ready and sling it around, I think they're going to look to do that, because the Badgers will want to run the ball and get that right, of course. But at the same time, when you see an opponent that's got a big weakness like that, you got to exploit it. So I would imagine Paul Chris is going to look to air it out and take advantage of his guys. Maybe not as much in the first half. Let the guys kind of get their feet back under them. But second half, I would imagine, if Graham Mertz is ready to go, he's going to be throwing it around.
This team probably can't wait to get on the field. They've owned this division. They think it's rightfully theirs. They won it again last year and look to going into this season to be prominently in the mix. Now, based on what I've seen, take down Minnesota several pegs. Iowa's lost two close games, so they look like they're still going to be competitive, but are already tagged with two losses in the division. That Wisconsin really needs to get back on the field, because they're most likely still the team to beat and the best team.
I think so. I think as long as they can play the rest, they got to play the rest of their games, of course, and they've got to win the rest of them. But if you start this week, you get a big win against Michigan. You got Northwestern next week. They've got a big one with Purdue that could kind of be, Wisconsin lost their game to Purdue, but they didn't get a loss in the loss column. So that bodes well for them. I think if you win this one next week and Northwestern comes out and beats Purdue, and next week's kind of your Big Ten West, driver's seat spot. So it's an interesting couple of weeks. They're all going to be meaningful for the Badgers going forward when you lose two, but it's going to be exciting, and hopefully they can make a run at this West Division title, and then we'll see what happens with Ohio State or possibly that sneaky Indiana team, which is looking good. So it's going to be a fun finish in the Big Ten for sure.
Yeah, as we've discussed several times with you, Tyler, take Illinois out of the mix. That with Scott Frost coming to Nebraska, it remains to be seen whether he's going to upgrade that program. But PJ Fleck certainly has at Minnesota. This might be a situation for a down year here, but this division is going to be competitive for years, and it looks like it's a very balanced division, but Wisconsin's still with the upper hand and the best team and best program until somebody proves otherwise. Tyler, we appreciate you stopping by. I want to encourage everyone to jump on over to SB Nation, Bucky'sFifthQuarter.com, and check out Tyler's work and everybody else that works on Badgers football as they prepare for Michigan. Tyler, appreciate you stopping by.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mark.